First question is, when did you first hear about what happened at Pearl Harbor?
The morning of Pearl Harbor.
How did you hear about it? Was it like the radio or?
Yeah, well, we were playing in the camp, in the air. We were playing, and one of the mothers came and said, "You guys better go home. Pearl Harbor's being attacked. There's going to be war."
Oh, really? What about you, Grandma? Do you remember?
I heard it on the radio.
On the radio?
On the news,
Oh, what did you?
And they didn't live in the same town, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your reaction? First reaction to what happened?
You really don't know.
How old were you guys?
This is what, 1941. So he was 7.
You were 7 and I was 8.
Yeah.
7 and 8.
Yeah.
So 41. Yeah, 41. I was 8.
So what were the first changes you noticed, like, after the attack on Pearl Harbor ended, and it was kind of like the aftermath? What did you first notice?
The first thing is that they required all the houses to black out their windows. They got like black tar paper to prevent the light from shining outside. And the reason for that was that way, if there's enemy planes coming over, they won't see where the towns are.
Oh.
So, there was blackout, and then there were, everybody had to be in the house by a certain time. It was a curfew.
It was curfew.
What time did you have to be in the house?
When it turned dark.
Sundown?
Sundown, yeah.
So were people still able to go to work and school like you normally did?
During the day.
Your
yeah.
normal routine.
Normal routine and everything.
But how was it different? How was it different though?
Oh, at that time, at that age,
Hard to remember.
hard to say, yeah.
Didn't you say you guys had to start carrying gas masks with you?
Yeah.
You had to carry gas masks all the time?
Every day we had to have gas masks.
Uh-huh.
They issued gas masks to everybody, and at school we would have drills to get it out of the case and to put it on. Oh, that was so awful. So
They would fill a room with tear gas.
Really?
And they would
they actually
go in
filled the room
there,
with tear gas.
and we would have to take off the gas mask and put it back on just to get the feel for it.
Uh-huh.
You had to do that at school?
Yeah,
I didn't do that.
we did that.
Wow.
What happened was that soon, not immediately after, but months later, once the soldiers, they started bringing in soldiers from the mainland.
Right.
And what they did was to take over, schools, Japanese school buildings and community centers, and then they would house the troops in those buildings. And
Really?
at night, the soldiers would patrol the camps and the residents, the areas where people live, and they would, they'd be patrolling the area, and then they used to have civilians they call them wardens. They would be walking around to make sure that the houses, the lights in the houses were completely
covered off,
showing outside.
Huh. So then, was there anything that was like closed down because of what happened at Pearl Harbor and all the internment?
No, not really. I think there was rationing. A lot of things like sugar, rubber, and things that were needed for the war effort were rationed. People can get only so much of it that you could buy.
So, but going to the store, that experience was the same? They didn't, assign you certain days to go or certain times to go or limit you to how much you could buy?
So
I can't remember that, because, we were young kids.
Yeah.
All we know that there was some rationing. Yeah.
And then, so, were churches or anything, schools or anything like that closed down?
Yeah, our church, soon after Pearl Harbor, they corralled all the reverends and the community leaders, and our church was shut down. There were no Buddhist services during the war. And the people who were leaders in the community, like the newspaper editors, leading businessmen, Japanese school teachers, ministers, whatever, the mainland. And a lot of times, the tragic part was that they would send the father, but the family was left behind, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They lost track of for the longest time, they didn't know where their father was.
Wow.
And eventually, some of them, I guess the whole family was sent to camp up here. But others, the families were left at home, and, you know, I don't know how they managed to survive, because in those days, there was no such thing as welfare, you know.
Right.
Yeah, so. If it's tied into internment, the reason they didn't, you know, they only picked up the leaders in the community that they suspected could be the ones that would lead any sort of uprising or whatever they were afraid of. They picked up only of them. But the reason they didn't move the rest of us, like they did up in the mainland, was that the economy depended on the Japanese. I think at that time, there must have been like maybe up to 60% of the population were Japanese. And if they pulled everybody else, there would be no one available to harvest the sugar cane, pick the pineapple, you know, and do all the other kind of work that was required for the economy to function. So, you know, they couldn't move these people.
There's too many.
You have to remember now, this is in Hawaii.
Right.
So the population is
majority. Majority of Japanese. Right.
Territory. It was a territory.
The territory.
It was not a state.
Wasn't a state yet.
Not a state
Right.
at that time.
So even though the senseis were all sent away, were you able to practice your religion?
No,
Not at all.
not at all.
So like, didn't you say that Grandpa Oda had a butsudan in his house, and that was
Did you have to get rid of it?
No, we didn't get rid of the Wutsudan. You know, the reaction wasn't as panicky as it was over here. Over here, they knew they were going to be rounded up and moved. And so they got rid of anything that was Japanese, and had to, a lot of them burned their cameras and like, this kendo equipment. Kendo is this Japanese swordmanship where you practice with bamboo swords, you know, and it was kind of like a sport. But those things, I know people up here said, oh, the father took it in the backyard and burned everything. You know.
They burned books.
But, you know,
Books.
it's not tied into your assignment, but as a whole, we had, as kids too, we had pretty free run of the area. We weren't really restricted. And the kind of a humorous thing is that, you know, when the soldiers were housed in these school buildings, because, you know, because there was no barracks and anything to house them.
Right.
They would put barbed wire around the whole school campus, you know, to kind of for security purposes.
Right.
So the soldiers were inside the barbed wire fence, and we were on the outside. And then they would come to the fence and say, hey, Sonny, can you run into the village and go buy me a pack of cigarettes or a pack of gum or whatever? You know, so we would run errands into the village and buy them the cigarettes or whatever they wanted. And then they would tip us like a nickel and stuff like that. Yeah. And then later on, as things got more relaxed, you know, the security was downgraded, so we were able to go in the barracks and talk to those guys. And they had this, there was an old blacksmith building that they used to use as a storage for ammunition. We used to sneak in there and go steal bullets.
What did you do with it?
50 caliber bullets.
Yeah.
50 caliber is about like 3-4 inches long.
Oh my gosh.
And then we would work the bullet, you know, the bullet part out and dump the powder, put it back in, and polish the brass and drill a hole at the end and hang it with a chain on our belt, you know. You know, and then I remember after Iwo Jima, which is quite a bit later in the war, when the Marines, after that big offensive, came back and they were housed in these barracks, they were issued all new equipment, and they threw away all those, their pup tents, their canteens, their daggers, and those Sam Brown bells. You know, they just dumped it in this big dump house that was about a couple miles away.
Yeah.
We would walk out there. They would salvage all those things. You know, so we got a lot of things from the stuff that they dumped.
All your army stuff.
Army supplies.
Huh?
All your army supplies?
Yeah.
So the soldiers were nice to
Another
you?
thing too is that I remember for recreation, the soldiers used to play baseball, you know. And there was this field in Lautanola, and we used to watch them play. And they were pretty good athletes. And even not in our town, but in Honolulu, there used to be a military. I don't know if it was the Air Force team, Army team, but they had a lot. Some of the major leaguers used to play there too. You know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had. You know, this is of course when things kind of got settled down.
So the soldiers were pretty nice to you?
Yeah, you know, they were okay. Well, I can't remember too much personal contact. I remember one corporal. He was a pretty nice guy, and our mother used to do laundry for those guys.
Really?
I don't know how the military didn't have any laundry facilities, I guess, and I don't know if they did their own, but my mother used to do laundry for them.
Oh, that's interesting.